Next, we'll check out the composition, number 3, Jumpy Illustration. Here we see a small clip from Artbeats of a mantis sitting on a small plant. What we want to do is create an animation with some natural brush strokes. But within the brush tips of After Effects, you'll see that we don't have any other tips available other than elliptical shapes. So what we'll want to do is open up Photoshop. Now if you don't have Photoshop, you can just watch along. What we'll do is create a little animation and then see how this animation works within After Effects. So we'll navigate to Photoshop and then create a new document. Inside the new document, I'll select Layer. Then from Video Layers, I'll choose a new blank video layer. This is new to Photoshop CS3. When I select a new video layer, I have the opportunity to paint across several different frames. Also in Photoshop, by clicking on the brush tool, then checking out the different brushes, I can see that there are many more brushes to choose from, and this allows me to create a much more diverse illustration. I'll choose a small brush here, then simply paint on my video layer. I'll undo that and make sure that I have black selected. I'll type X on the keyboard to switch the color chips from white and black to black and white. Next, I'll simply create a single eye and open up the window to reveal my animation. So from the window pull-down menu, I'll select Animation. This may look familiar to you as it's a timeline similar to the brush strokes as we see in After Effects. I'll open this up a little more, then click on the flyout menu in the upper right-hand corner of the window. Navigating up to Go To, I can see that I can navigate to the next frame here. I can't see where my last painting was, but at the bottom of this window, if I turn on onion skinning, I can see a silhouetted version of that last eye. I want to draw a similar, but not exactly the same, eyeball. I'm drawing with the mouse, so it may not look as good as it could, but I only need to draw about 4 or 5 frames. Before we click on the window pull-down menu, we'll advance to the next frame one more time. Here again, we'll draw a small overlay, almost tracing the last eye that we drew. This can be very rough, and it will add to the character of our animation. We'll create a couple more by going forward to the next frame, then creating our shape, and really make these really very rough. It'll add to the excitement of the illustration as it jumps around on our mantis. The last thing we want to do is trim the layer down to the current time. So again, we'll navigate back to our flyout menu. We want to trim the layer to the current time that we're parked at. We'll click here to trim it down. Next, we'll move the work area by clicking and holding the Shift key down so that it snaps to the end of that layer. The last thing we want to do is go back to this menu. Next, we'll trim the entire document down to the duration of the work area. Now we can turn off the onion skin, and we have a small animation that we can see by clicking and dragging inside of our animation timeline. All we need to do here is save it. But before we do that, let's double-click on the layer to rename it Eyeball. We'll use Control-S or Command-S on the Mac to save this and put it with your project files for Chapter 6. We'll open up the folder for Chapter 6 and deposit it into our Photoshop files. We'll call this Eyeball. We do want to make sure that the compatibility is maximized so we can see this in After Effects CS3 as an animation. So let's jump back to After Effects. Then in our project panel, we'll select Photoshop. Then import the file by using Control-I or Command-I on a Mac. We'll select it, then open it up. After Effects is going to ask us whether we want the merged layers or we want to choose a layer. We don't need all of the layers, only the layer that has the eyeball animation. We'll say OK, and we see that After Effects has brought this in as a Photoshop document. The Photoshop document, rather than just having size for width and height, now has a duration of 5 frames, and we can see that it's playing at 30 frames per second. In addition, if we use Control F or Command F on the Mac, we can see that this layer is now interpreted as footage. We can loop this footage, and looping it 60 times should give us 10 seconds, more than enough to cover our animation. Next, all we have to do is drag this animation created in Photoshop down into our After Effects composition. Now we can see the animation created in After Effects in our composition. We'll simply move this up, rotate it a little bit by typing W on the keyboard to navigate to the Rotate tool. Then, using Control D or Command D to duplicate it, we'll change its scale and unlink the scale and modify that to a negative value to flip it over. We'll press 0 on the number pad to create a quick RAM preview to see what our animation looks like with those eyes blinking at the top of our mantis.